Welcome pilots to another Jetworks video. This one I'll be building the Tornado. I'll be using the construction manual just as a guide to help me get my way through this build. It looks and seems relatively quick. So first step was to get the belly panel out. Chose to use had a Fleming 70mm EDF unit running 4S. So on the belly panel with the slots that are pre-marked for either a 70mm or a 64mm, I chose to measure it up and make sure that it was the right size for the EDF mounts itself, so that when I put it into the slots it'll fit pretty good. I used the back mount as the guide, and the front slot I pushed that back a bit. So here on the belly panel I'm just using a scrap piece of foam, getting a 6mm gap round the outside and just marking it with a pen. And as you can see here, like I say, using the construction manual as a guide, and obviously I had it round the wrong way. I was ready to put it at the rear, so managed to get a grip on things and started with the corner reinforcers for the front. So I've marked it up, got the 4 pieces there, and what we'll do, using the template, just marking the centre line as well. So a small thin bead of glue as we do, and just smudge it along so it's very thin application, but it sticks pretty good, pretty well straight away. And do the same with the second one itself. Line it up so that they're nice and tight together. And then we're moving on to bulkhead 1, 2 and the RX tray itself. So with the bulkheads 1 and 2, just popping out the 6mm gaps in there. Just test fitting it, a wee bit of Yoo-hoo pour. So I'm using Yoo-hoo and 5-minute epoxy and 30-minute epoxy as well. So once I've got the bulkhead 1 in, I'm using the RX tray just as a guide to mark on it where the bulkhead 2 is going to go, so it meets nice and flush with where the RX tray should be. Allow it to air dry a wee bit and then put it into place. Next step on the guide is fuselage sides and the rear fuselage corner reinforcers. So as I've got the sides, as you can see, I'm just forming it over the table just to get that curve so it matches along the sides of the reinforcers there. A small amount of glue along the side, and do the same on both sides, and then offer them up. I did allow it to go a wee bit tacky, but at the back there it looks rather tight, so I just slid it back a wee bit and got a bit of tape just to hold it together in place. Squeeze it together so that the 2 tapered ends meet, so it's nice and smooth transition going into the EDF. And then here on the rear corner reinforcers, sorry. Now they're all the same size, and when I offered them up, as you can see there, there's the one that's just a bit longer than the other. It just didn't make sense. However, kept going. I thought, well, just go with it and trim it. But at the front there, what I did, I didn't actually push it right up into the wee slots. So I just had a wee look at the belly panel to check, and then reapplied it. So the next part I'm doing is the belly reinforcer at the back, where we're going to obviously mount the servos, and just using the rear bulkhead for the EDF unit, just sizing that up so it's nothing seems out of place. So offer it up to fuselage, just smudge it about a wee bit and then allow it to dry. So here I'm test fitting the Fleming 70mm. And just marking there where I'm going to put some glue. Know that it's really difficult to understand where you're going to put it, but I thought I'd just mark it anyway. So I've got a wee bit glue around the rear of the EDF unit itself and at the front there, and I'm just twisting the bulkheads round about so there's a nice even application around the unit itself. A wee bit of glue on the contact surfaces there. Hooking up the AC and just moving the wires into position. And then offer it up and slide it into place. Just make sure you push it right down so it's nice and flush. So next part is the light ply, or 3mm light ply, or using the plans to 3D print the parts and stuff as well. So I chose to print them in PLA, these parts, the wing pieces. So while I was doing the wing pieces, I thought, well, get the epoxy out and we'll just do it all in the one go. The PLA plus spars, I think there was 3 walls on it. 3 bottom, 3 top. And I think there was 10% infill, not a lot. I'm just hoping that they're strong enough to support it, or it'll be tragic. So here, as we do with the carbon rods, got some masking tape there just to hold it nice and flush. A small amount of glue, and just as you can see, I'm just at this part here, I'm just putting glue around the contact surfaces at the edge, and then obviously a good bit in where the carbon rod goes. Push that into place and then do the same with the next one as well. Just tidying up any spare epoxy that I had. Obviously I allow it to go. I used 30-minute epoxy here just to give it the time. Just so that when I'd mixed it up I didn't get in a mess and have the epoxy going off before I managed to get it all into place. So there's a vertical stabiliser and the wings done. So next step was the rear fuselage sides and supposed to be the lower supports. So there, just where I trimmed out, you can see it's marked in a square. That's using the plans. That's so we can, it accepts the bottom part of the fuselage sides here. So I've got a small amount of glue along the corner reinforcers and just using a couple of modelling pins, tacking it into place at the back, both parts. And then just slowly moving along to the front of the fuselage and just tacking it in as I go. And then decided to use a wee bit of tape here, and to be honest, sometimes tape's the best option because it doesn't move like the modelling pins. Sometimes the foam can slide off them unless you put the pins in a crisscross formation sort of thing rather than one direction. So now that that's along, give it time to set, and then obviously the lower intakes, what I'm doing here is I'm just sizing it up just to make sure everything fits and things. I 3D printed the intake which slotted into the free wing. You can see there's a wee lip there at the front of the EDF unit and it slots in absolutely perfect. So next step is the intake itself, and then obviously the rear of the EDF unit for the exhaust and the servo. So here I'm putting in the servo, the elevator supports, mounts. 3D printed these as well, again in PLA plus it was. I didn't really I didn't change any of the settings. I just printed it stock as it comes from the printer. So I'll feed through the wires and my servos just to get them sort of in place so that I can start figuring out how to get the control rods in place. So here I've got a 6mm carbon spar going through these elevator supports. Now it is there is a wee bit of movement in here, probably 7 or 8mm, probably a 7mm would fit it better. Or put a wee collar inside of the support. However, I just went with it. No bothered about a wee bit of movement. I know we do try to remove as much slack and flex as possible, but I don't mind a wee bit. So there's the control rod. Once I've got it hooked up to the servo's in place, I'm just marking on the push rod itself where I'm expecting to put the Z-bend in so that it lines up with the elevator itself, the rod, the control rod for it, the carbon spar. What I've done is I've printed the elevator control horns from, I think it was the F14, the Tomcat. There's a wee control rod there, control horn there. Absolutely fantastic, these. I blew it up, the stock plans blew it up to, I think it was 108%, and then the 6mm carbon rod just slides straight into it. And a nice fit, it's kind of push fit. So once I've got the push rods in place, just using a bit of hot glue and securing the servos in, and then moving on to the 3D printed intake. While I'm still working on the elevators here. So there's the carbon rod, 6mm. I've cut that to what I thought was the right size, and then just attaching the control rods, and then sliding it on using some CA glue to attach it. So here it was a wee bit tricky inside. There was not a lot of space because I'd upped the ESC. Initially I had a 50 amp ESC in there, but when I put it through the meter it was showing I was pulling 57 amps. So I whacked a 60 amp ESC in it. That should be more than enough. So as you can see, I'm just putting a wee bit of hot glue around it to get it into place, so that in the slot where it's supposed to go in the bottom of the intake. Now this one here was the original size, and as you can see there was a wee gap. If I just pause it a wee second. So here, there's the original. I've got a black line along it, so I actually expanded the one that I've got in here and enlarged it. Obviously, like at the start of the build where I said the front EDF mount was actually pushed back, so I enlarged it. I think it was about 12-15mm, just so that it fits nicely and it's longer and it meets up with the wing box itself. So the next step was to do the corner reinforcers, and probably or possibly the 3D printed exhaust fit this. Apologies for the pictures there, they seem a wee bit blurry. Don't really understand why. So here's the exhaust, obviously fitting it up to the rear of the mount itself. And I trimmed a wee bit off the bottom there just so it sits nice and flush, and you want it as close to the bottom itself. Using the exhaust itself, put that onto the thrust tubes just to make sure it's aligned and straight. It's quite difficult to judge just by looking at it. So once the thrust tube's in place, moved on to the corner reinforcers, and again just a small amount of glue on each side and a wee bit of trimming there just to allow any movement of or to get it in place so that it doesn't rub up against the thrust tubes itself. Small amount of glue just on one side, and then offer it up and slide it into position. There was a wee bit on the rear end, but I thought, well, we can just trim that up so it's nice and flush before we put the exhaust on. So the rear fuselage sides we've done. Now it's time to get back to the lower intake panels. So again, I was just measuring it up there, just a wee test fit, make sure it's fine. I've got some glue along the contact surfaces of the intakes itself, and then I've got some on the fuselage, the belly panel, sorry, and then I've got a wee bit yoo-hoo gone down the side of the EDF intake itself, the mouth. So offering them up, sliding them into position, and it looked a pretty good fit. It was kind of close straight up to the bottom lip of the printed intake. I was quite happy with that. In terms of round the sides, where the side panels going to, we'll attach, we'll glue those later. So here kind of jumped forward a wee bit and moved on to the forward corner reinforcers just at the cockpit. So a small amount of glue on to them, smudge it about, and then with that just offer it up to the fuselage and slide it into position. Same with the opposite one, and do the same with the next two pieces itself. As you can see there on the table, I've got the wing box printed in lightweight PLA and the servo housing itself there, which sits just below the wing box. That's actually printed in lightweight PLA. That may be a downfall, obviously, with the stress of the servo moving the wings, but here's hoping it doesn't. It's only one way to find out. I seem to be testing the lightweight PLA more and more these days, and I've not had a failure yet, so fingers crossed it'll all be fine. And then just sizing up the forward fuselage here, keeping the wee cutout inserts for the bottom of the canopy. So here we've got the bottom of the wing box. I put that in place. Off the up, we've got a wee bit of epoxy on both sides of the fuselage sides itself, just meeting up with the wing box. I just held that in place, and here I'm just getting the wing box servo in itself. Obviously I've glued that into position. Sorry I missed it on the video, but I'm pretty sure you'll understand where it goes. There is only one location for it, and the shape is there, so you can't really go wrong. So testing up the servo, got that into place, and it looks fine. I put a wee bit of glue in there just to hold it, but like I say, due to it being lightweight PLA, I'm hoping that, you know, it doesn't twist or bend or actually give up. It'll be fine. I'm sure it'll be fine. If there's anything I should be worrying about, is the wing box. So here, just with the top of the intake, as you can see there's a tiny wee gap, and that's supposed to attach that to the bottom of the wing box, and it was just a couple of millimeters. So I just used a wee bit of CA glue, just about a wee bit there, and just held down the intake itself so it made contact. Wee bit accelerator, and that was fine. So I measured it out. I think it was 13 or 14 millimeters. So all I'm doing is just getting a wee bit fiberglass cloth. This is really lightweight stuff. I mix up a wee bit of epoxy itself. So obviously I've put some CA glue in it, but chose to just put a wee bit fiberglass cloth and some, it was 30-minute epoxy I used here. And also the small squares that are there, or rectangle, I used that for the support on the inside of the fuselage sides, and just attach that to the bottom of the wing box. So here on the top, just a small amount of glue, and then just using a scrap piece of foam, forcing the fiberglass cloth into it, just for a wee bit extra support. I'm pretty sure it'll be fine. I don't think there was any real need to do this, but I thought, you know, we'll get it on there anyway. Now be careful when you're using epoxy. It is irritating to skin, but fortunately off camera, you know, I'll go and wash my hands after I get them start through with glue and things. Maybe I just shouldn't be touching the glue. And here I'm just using a wee, picked up the fiberglass cloth, stuck it inside, and then using a wee bit of scrap piece of foam to push into place. And I did the same with the opposite side as well. As it's quite tacky, sometimes the cloth can get pulled and things. So once I was happy with that, I moved on to the forward fuselage and the cover for the canopy. Just sized up, made sure I was happy with the a wee test fit, and then a small amount of glue around the contact surfaces there. Get a wee smudge about so there's a nice even coating. We're not missing any gaps in terms of where the glue is, and just allow it to dry a wee bit air dry, and then offer it up, holding it at the front, and then just working away to the back, sliding it into place, applying a wee bit of pressure just to make sure it's stuck pretty well. And then I've got the forward fuselage bridge piece, I think it is, just so that when we get to sanding, it's nice and flush onto the nose and also onto the canopy itself. So there's the nose, printed in lightweight PLA. I think it was 2 walls, 0% infill, and then attach that. Yep, bridge panels done, we've done that. Wing boxes is done, we've got them in place. Now the screws and the wee hinges and things, what I've done, these on the wing box here, I actually used the screws because I had a couple, so it was just kind of getting the wing into place, get the wee pin in, don't really worry about securing it right down, and then I made up some push rods with strong clevises on the end, albeit plastic. Again, there's possibly another failure to come if I dunk the wings on a landing, and then just measuring it up and adjusting them so that they both are level, come out to the same place, and then retract to the same place as well. As you can see there on the left wing, when it closes up against the wing box, there was a couple of mils gap larger than on the right wing, so it's just a matter of adjusting the clevises and getting them to match up nice and even, which is a bit of a pain, but it's better. There we go. Yeah, it was closing up pretty good there. So once I was happy with that, next step was the fuselage top for me, and then the fuselage middle. So on the underside, I was just using a bit of fibre tape just to cover it, so to try and relieve any friction from the wings moving back and forward. So just a wee bit over it, and then trimmed it up. And obviously this is the top side that we're looking at with the tape on the underside. So for the rear part, again, just some glue on the contact surfaces, including the exhaust, and then a wee bit across the front there when it meets up with the wing box, and then slide into place. I was just kind of lining the front of it there up to the wing box, just so there's actually covers, and the glue meets each side. Although there is a tiny wee gap, I thought, well, it's done now, it's on. And a wee bit of extra glue, no support. So here we are moving on to the intakes. I've just got some glue along the contact surfaces, and then using all the modelling pins I can find by the looks of things. It's like a pin cushion on an airplane. Anyhow, we tied up with a scrap piece of foam, any of the excess glue, and again working for the back, just moving along and holding the intakes in place. And then there's the front cover itself. That was a pretty good tight fit. Just be careful around the wing section when you're applying the glue, that you don't want any excess glue going through to the wings itself, which will obviously inhibit the movement of the wings folding and extending. But yeah, I was happy with that. It was a nice fit. Certainly taking shape. Looks pretty epic, to be honest. So just a wee bit of tape, just along the back of the foam, so there's meeting up with the wing box itself. So underneath onto the shrouds, we've cut the shrouds, as you can see there. I've 3D printed some of the discs to allow the wee pins. As you can see, I've got a couple of pins made out there with the plans, with the measurements for retracting the wing tanks or the big missiles, call it what you like. So in these forward shrouds, again, just be mindful of where you're putting the glue here, because again, you don't want it to inhibit the wing mechanism travelling back and forward. Now when I put it on, I thought, yeah, it's pretty cool, that's awesome. However, by the time it had dried and then went to test the wings again, there was certainly something catching it, which seemed to be these parts, the forward shrouds. So removed them, trimmed it up, cleaned the glue off, and put it back on. It's fine here. So these lower shrouds that I've got on, I actually trimmed these also just probably about 2 or 3 mil on the inside up against the fuselage wall, because when I fitted the drop tanks, they weren't quite as straight. Anyhow, we've got them on now. There's one of the wing tanks, just to show you, for example, with the wings moving back and forward. Yeah, the wings are quick, but I can slow that down in the radio itself. So what I've done here, I actually used 2 screws from a plug, a wall socket, believe it or not. They were countersunk. It was the only screws that I had. So what I've done is I drilled straight through the wing so that the screw was free, and then the idea was to screw it into the drop tank itself. That way the drop tank is secured. However, the screw that's going through the wing, there won't be any friction there whatsoever, so it should move freely in the wing. It shouldn't stop it or slow it down at all. However, the screw will be fixed in the wing, the drop tank itself, and it seems to be working pretty well. So I'd attached the wee push rods there, put it into the wing, the drop tank itself, and as you can see there, what I'm doing is I just get it in a wee bit into the drop tank itself, and it does move freely. And then what I'll do is I'll just drill it, screw it into the drop tank itself. Like I say, it'll be nice and free in the wing, and I've got it up just, it was actually a wee bit close there. So I will adjust this just to get it as close to, as tight against the wing as possible without causing any friction and adding any stress on the wing servos moving back and forward. And as you can see, it looked pretty good. It worked freely. So we'll just hook up the battery and test it out. Yep, works fantastic. And as you can see, they are a bit straighter, albeit, at an angle here. But yeah, they work pretty well. It's fantastic design. Again, another one by Craig, superb. So next step, I'd already shaped the bottom and the top. So the next step was to fix the elevators, elevons, the rear control surfaces. Now, I'd measured it out. I think it was about 3.5 centimetres. So what I did was I cut some scrap foam so that it was just over 3 centimetres. And then when I put a piece of 6mm Depron on it, it takes it nice and level, or that was the intention, and it worked out pretty well. It's amazing what you do with scrap pieces of foam. Rather than looking for 2 books, it's probably not the right size, or probably not got 2 of the same book. Anyway, the intention was to try and keep the fuselage as flat to the table as possible, so that when I'm securing the elevators onto it, they should be as true and as flat in terms of the angle with the fuselage itself. So again, a wee bit of tape underside just to stop the epoxy going through. This was 5-minute epoxy, and then again just touching the outsides, make sure it's on the foam, but be careful you don't get too close to the control supports itself, because you don't want to be epoxying them as well. It's just the rods that we're after. So I've got a wee bit of tape there, placed a couple of batteries on the end just to make sure that they were pushed in and it was nice and flat and it didn't move up at all. So once that was done, I was happy with that. Mix up another wee bit of epoxy here, and then what we'll do is we'll just tape up the tops of it so that we can put a wee bit extra epoxy in the top and just have it nice and flush, a cleaner finish, because we only put just enough in the bottom just to cover the bottom and the elevator itself. So now I'm just backfilling it with a wee bit of epoxy, again being careful not to come onto the supports itself. Take the tape off and just allow that to set. So here's the 3D intakes, again lightweight PLA that I've printed. Got these done, look fantastic. And on the 6mm foam, I was going to leave it just foam, then decided nah, chopping that off. Let's get the 3D printed ones on. So the next step for me was the turtle deck, assembling the turtle deck. So I've got the two sides in place in the locating tabs on the fuselage itself, then a wee bit of the front, just so it was nice, all nice and flush and flat. Once I was happy with that, just got a wee bit of tape and held it all together so it was nice and tight. And then it was the turtle deck inner. Again, just some glue around the contact surfaces. And then because it's still in the fuselage, then I know it's going to be the right shape and it's not going to be off. So just push the sides along to meet up with the turtle deck inner, just to make sure that it was bit of glue on both contact surfaces, and it was actually starting to slide out of the front. So there I've got a couple of pins in just again to hold it. Wee bit of tape just to tape it together, just so the contact surfaces are meeting. Once I was happy with that, just gave it a few minutes just to make sure the glue was curing. Once I was happy with that, I take it off and then start to build it on the table. So what I've done here is got some glue along the contact surfaces and then upside down where it's nice and flat, a nice flat finish, and just lining it up along so that I can get them as true and smooth as you can. Hopefully you can see there at the back. There's still a wee bit of sand in just to get the right angle, so I thought if I do it this way, I know I can measure it up and get them as straight as possible, nice and flush, and then I'll get to the sand in. So next step, vertical stabilizer and the stabilizer sides. I've actually put the sides on to the vertical stabilizer, glued it in. So I've put the turtle deck in place, I had the stabilizer in there as well, and then what I've done is I've marked off by using the canopy how much I can actually take off, using a razor blade, obviously a sharp one, just being careful and trimming away as much foam as possible before I actually go to sanding it, because there's nothing worse than having to sand, and especially when you've got lots to sand. So trim off as much as you can, get the shape as close to what it is you're looking for, and then sand it down. So now that we've done that, again just size it up. I've actually got some glue in there and on the contact surfaces, just to make sure that I get a nice bond when I put it on. I don't want it coming off at all. So we'll get some glue along the contact surfaces, and then there's a bit on the inside. We'll get some glue on the inside so that it makes contact with the vertical stabilizer when I put it in. So we're going to put both of these in at the same time. I'll line this up. I'll get the vertical stabilizer, as you can see there, a wee bit of U-hoop on, and mix it about, wee spacing in it to stop it getting stuck. And then get some 5-minute epoxy for the vertical stabilizer. And what we'll do is I'll get the glue on the bottom, the locating tabs, the stab, and then we'll put that into place. We'll get the turtle deck on, sort of line that up as best as I can. And the stabiliser sides, I've already sanded these parts down. As you can see, I've got a wee bit of trailing edge on it as well. That's not going to save it for hitting the trees or coming in inverted landings. So sliding the vertical stabiliser into place with the 5-minute epoxy, holding it and getting it as straight as possible. There is a wee twist in the horizontal stabiliser. It goes off as if, you know, there's a bit of rudder in it, but that's obviously just the foam. Never noticed that, unfortunately. So once I'm holding that, 5 minutes I held it for until the vertical stabiliser went off, and then obviously we've got the turtle deck in place as well. And that's it. That's pretty much how I've went about building the Tornado, guys. Obviously the plan's asking you to go and sand a wee bit here. The canopy, I've not included the canopy as yet, guys, because I've still to do that, but I thought get the video together, let you see it. Hopefully it'll help some of you build it. It looks fantastic, and I'm pretty sure the 70mm setup is going to be crazy. And when I say crazy, what I mean, 70mm overpowered. The 64 would have been more than enough, or a pusher setup like Gary's done here. Unfortunately, I don't believe he's had a chance to maiden it yet because he's changed flying fields. However, here's hoping he can get it up in the air soon. Same with me, I'll get the EDF up, show you how I found it. But I hope, once again, I hope this has helped you guys, whoever chooses to build it, and thanks again for staying this long. Take care, pilots, and happy skies.